Hello guys, this is your friend Uzumkai Universe 2.0. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto first met and secretly started dating Tenten, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Sakura Haruno sat under the shady tree she liked so much at Team 7's training ground. She was resting after a hard day of training and was waiting for her teammates to finish, or rather, she was waiting for Sasuke to finish. Kakashi had officially dismissed him after receiving word that the Hokage needed him for a private mission, but Naruto and Sasuke had decided to use this time to have a no-holds-barred spar. So she was just waiting for Sasuke to finish beating Naruto in the hopes that he might decide to ask if he could walk her home. Sure, Sasuke said no the last 68 times, but she had very high hopes for attempt number, well, you know. Besides, it's not like it was her fault Sasuke turned her down, no, it was Naruto's. At the mere thought of her annoying teammate, Sakura ground her teeth and her temper shortened. That idiot was always getting in her way when it came to her Sasuke-kun, why couldn't he just leave the two of them alone? She was sure that if Naruto were out of the way, then making the Uchiha fall in love with her would be easy. Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Sakura heard Sasuke yell. He must be getting serious if he was starting to use jutsu on Naruto. Oh well, Sasuke will win no matter what Naruto does. Sakura, look out. She heard Naruto yell, making her snap her eyes open. One of Sasuke's fireballs was heading right for her, moving insanely fast. Sakura struggled to get her body to move, but nothing was working as she was paralyzed with the sudden fear of being burned alive. The fireball was about to hit her when Naruto appeared in front of her, his arms outstretched to ensure that he was an effective shield. The fireball collided with him and he was blown back through the air past Sakura and her tree, and was about to hit the ground when Sasuke appeared and kneed Naruto in the back, thus suspending him momentarily in the air just long enough for Sasuke to spin on his heel and slam his foot into Naruto's stomach, crushing him into the ground. Naruto gasped for air as Sasuke doubled over in exhaustion. I win. Sasuke muttered to Naruto as he tried to even out his breathing. Naruto's eyes shot open at Sasuke's words as he started to piece everything together. Wasn't an accident, you aimed for her. What if I hadn't reached in time? Sasuke glowered and straightened up. Don't really care, he said, then looked over towards Sakura who was running towards them. He grunted before he turned and started to walk away. Naruto groaned, in pain and anger. Sakura finally slowed to a stop near Naruto's burned body, looking between him and the retreating boy who had her heart torn as to what to do. Naruto had saved her from that fireball, he had protected her and was badly hurt because of it, but she had waited all this time for Sasuke to walk her home, and while it was wrong, since Naruto couldn't move, he couldn't possibly ruin this chance for her. Sakura scrunched up her eyes and turned towards Naruto. She may not like him that much, but she was still grateful. After all, if that fire had hit her, she might have been scarred and burned to a point where she would look hideous. She knelt down next to him to Naruto's surprise, and as he turned his head to face her, she cringed a bit. It was worse than she thought. You're pretty hurt, Naruto, don't move. It's really bad, but I have some ointment and stuff that I think can help. Maybe I should run to the hospital. Sakura. The two heard. Sakura turned around and saw Sasuke waiting by the tree line. Hey, I'll walk you home if you want, he said. Sakura seemed to shut down for a moment as she processed those words. However, once she checked and double-checked to make sure she wasn't dreaming, she felt a small twinge of anger at her beloved Uchiha. How could he possibly ask that when he can see that she was busy trying to help Naruto? Naruto, who the Uchiha burned near to a crisp. She turned back to Naruto and grimaced a small bit once again at how much worse he seemed to be getting. His skin was blackening and his face, Kami, it was bad. I can't fix this. There's no way I can, she thought before she reached her decision. If she couldn't, she'd just have to bring someone who could. As she got up though, Both Naruto and Sasuke had the same thought. That Sakura was choosing Sasuke over Naruto. It was heartbreaking for the young blonde to see the pink-haired girl break out into a run in Sasuke's direction. Sasuke smirked and shot Naruto a look that the blonde somehow unknowingly understood. I'm going to take everything from you, Naruto. Everything. Sasuke then turned and moved so that he could keep pace with Sakura, thus making Naruto miss the last message in his eyes. Only then will you become stronger. And so Naruto found himself alone in his training grounds, burned, bruised, and hurting too much to move. He could only stare at the space where the two people that had meant the most to him had been moments before they left him. It was then that he realized he was doing something that he had sworn to himself to never do again. Naruto was crying at his loneliness. Tenten was close. She knew it was going to happen today. Everything was leading up to it. Neji was going to be hers today, and the universe was helping any way that it could. First, she and Neji had visited Lee in the hospital to congratulate him on the success of the surgery. She had even gotten to meet her idol Tsunade, and her sensei Guy had been in the room to give everyone the day off. Neji, who hadn't eaten yet, had then heard Tenten's stomach growl. Being the gentleman that he was, by which I mean state the obvious to everyone in the room, then say that it wasn't good to skip meals, Neji offered to treat Tenten to brunch. She jumped at the opportunity to be with the Hyuga and promptly led him out of the hospital to her favorite bakery. After a nice brunch with Neji being silent as Tenten never stopped talking, Tenten recommended they go buy a gift for Lee. Neji grudgingly accepted, and the next 3 hours were spent with the two shopping more for Tenten than they were for Lee. Finally, Neji decided to walk Tenten home, saying that he was tired of her voice and wanted to relax at home. Tenten pouted a bit but decided that at least the Hyuga was paying attention to her. So here they were walking side by side, and Tenten was almost ready to confess her feelings to the boy when she heard someone shout their names. She turned to see that pink-haired girl that Lee was always talking about and that cute Uchiha boy Sasuke. They seemed to be going somewhere with a purpose in mind, or at least Pinky did, but they slowed down as they reached them. Hi Tenten, Neji, she said, making Tenten feel a bit guilty that she forgot the girl's name. Are either of you too busy? You see, we have a team at Training Ground 7 who is in pretty bad shape, and why aren't you helping him then? Tenten said, cutting the girl off. Pinky seemed caught off guard for a moment before stammering her reply. Well, I was going to help him, but you see, Sasuke here. Oh, I get it now. Tenten cut her off again, her anger very apparent to the other three. You left your own teammate just so you could walk home with this snobby Uchiha. You know it's fangirls like you that give real kunoichi like me a bad name. Where's your sense of decency, respect? Bah. Before Sakura could even defend herself from the false allegations, Tenten was off towards Training Ground 7 to help the kid. Sakura could only stare off after her, hurt and insulted at her words, Sasuke and Neji doing the same, only feeling a bit impressed at Tenten's actions. Tenten, however, was grumbling a bit at the fact she lost her chance to confess to Neji. Still, comrades come before love, so she didn't feel too bad about it. Naruto had finally stopped crying through sheer effort alone. He knew that his cuts were already healing, and that his bones had set back into their proper places, but the burns. It was too much for him. He couldn't move because of the pain, and when he tried, his blackening skin would break and bleed. He was just so tired of even trying to get up though, not because of the burns, but because he was nearing the end of his rope. It's always like this, he thought. Sasuke beats me again and Sakura just follows him around him because she loves him. Neither of them really care about me. I thought Sakura was coming around. I thought she was finally beginning to like me, but she left for the Tem like always. Another tear left Naruto's eyes and he had to struggle to not break down again. At that moment Naruto heard a rustling in the grass as something ran towards him. At first he thought it was an animal, but then he recognized the sound as human footsteps, so maybe he was out of luck and a hateful villager wanted to kick him while he was down. He was sure the villager would leave and bring back friends too, so it was just going to be more pain. But then he heard a gasp and someone fall to their knees next to him. Naruto opened his eyes and saw a cute girl around his age with two buns on her head looking over him with her hand hovering over his body. Cammy, I never imagined it was this bad. How could they leave you like this? He heard her say. She lifted his hand and started muttering to herself again. These look like third-degree burns, he's going to be scarred for life. Oh Cammy, she cried out as he saw her finally look at his face. Her eyes went wide and she covered her mouth, reaching out with her other hand to nearly touch him. Naruto began to get worried and tried to speak, but Tenten shook her head and began to make a few hand signs. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, she said as her hands began to glow a faint green and she moved them towards his face. I can't fix everything, the burns ate away towards your muscles. I don't have the proper techniques or enough chakra to fix them all the way. So I'm going to heal them to wear their skin so that I can at least put salves and medicine on them. It's going to hurt so much. I'm so sorry. She finally put her hands on Naruto's face and the boy felt like screaming if he could find his voice. After 3 minutes of pain, Tenten panted in exhaustion and cut off the technique. Slowly she brought her head up to face Naruto and he could see a tiny smile on her face as she reached out and touched him again, this time on the smooth skin of his whiskered cheek. Naruto almost cried then and there, but he swallowed it down and croaked out a thank you to the girl. Her eyes turned sad and she slowly shook her head before grabbing and eating a chakra food pill. Don't thank me yet. I spent a lot more chakra on your face than I should have. That means doing the rest of them is going to go even more slowly. She trembled in place for a moment before looking at him again. Are you ready? He nodded at the question and Tenten went to work, starting with his right hand. The two of them didn't keep track of how long they were like that. All they knew is that when they started there was light out, and now it was dark, the moon rising up filling the training ground with light. When Tenten cut off the technique for the last time, Naruto was gasping in pain, tears washing down his face. Tenten shuffled towards him a bit and stroked his hair, trying to calm him down and show him that the worst of it was over. It only took a few minutes, and by the time it did, Naruto was ready for the next part. Tenten pulled out a scroll and unsealed several pieces of medical equipment. She chose a large tub of burn ointment and uncapped it before pushing away Naruto's jacket. She had to break the zipper to get it off of him when she was healing him, but had put it back on him since it was the only article of intact clothing he had left. His black shirt was now in pieces courtesy of her kunai. This burn salve is the most potent one I have. It will hurt and give you a cold burn for a while, but trust me when I say that this will help. Once I'm done applying it and the bandages, it should be safe to move you around so that we can get you to the hospital. They should be able to do more for you there, she said before she scooped her hand in the salve. Naruto could only think of how the hospital would most likely just leave him be, thinking that he had enough medical treatment to stay alive. Still, it felt extremely good that someone was taking their time to help him in such a way. He cringed as the salve hit his raw skin, but didn't do anything until he caught a strange scent. He lifted his head to see the ointment smoking on his chest for a moment, causing him to panic until he felt Tenten's firm grip on his injured shoulder. Don't move. I know it looks bad, but this will help. I promise. She continued to put the ointment on his body for the next 10 minutes, before she unfurled a large roll of bandages. She began to bandage his now ointment-coated legs, pausing embarrassedly when she reached his thigh before doing the same for his other leg and both arms. Finally, she reached back to his chest and helped him sit up with an awkward kind of hug. She began to wrap him up, stomach first, all the while assuring him that things were going to go fine, despite the obvious worry in her eyes. That was when he finally recognized her. You're that girl who was worried about bushy brows, Tenten. Tenten's head shot up and she really looked at Naruto for the first time before her eyes widened. You're that guy that beat Neji, Naruto. Wow. What happened to you? How'd someone like you know? Naruto's face fell as he answered. I was training with Sasuke Tem. He said coldly. The Uchiha did this to you? Yeah. We were sparring and I was beginning to get some hits in on him. I was about to finish it when he cast a fireball jutsu. He aimed for Sakura on purpose knowing that I would go and protect her and he attacked me right after I got hit by the fireball. Then Sakura was about to help me when she ran off towards her precious Sasuke-kun. He spat. Tenten glared in anger at the thought of the pink-haired girl and the Uchiha. How could anyone justify such action? That girl should get her handed to her, and she'd gladly do it if need be. It's always like this, Naruto said, his voice taking on his somber mood. I try to get Sasuke to recognize me as a rival, and I try to get Sakura to see me, at least as a friend. Ow. Stop with the pity party. Tenten shouted, patting Naruto's bandaged back. She shifted until she was sitting right across from Naruto and stared into his eyes. I don't really know you that well, Naruto, but I have a small idea as to who you are. You always put everything you have into anything that you do. You defend your friends and stand up for those who are too afraid to. And even those who couldn't care less about you, well, you fight for them. You're a good guy, Naruto, and I know you'll go far. She smiled at him and his eyes lit up as she patted his head. But anyways, hey, listen anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that people like the Uchiha and Pinky really aren't worth your time. You can do a lot better than them. Trust me when I tell you that people like them will only hurt you. For a moment as she said that, her face lost a lot of that confidence it had and her voice became low and hurt. Most people wouldn't have noticed it as well as Naruto had, but he had always been good at reading when people were sad and lonely. Tenten, he said softly. Who hurt you? Tenten stiffened, then closed her eyes and sighed. She looked at Naruto and searched his eyes. When I was a year and a half old, my parents fought against the Kyuubi. They died. I was sent to the survivors' orphanage and grew up there. For some reason, no one wanted to adopt children around my age, but I always hoped and prayed that someday I'd get parents. That hope turned into a desperate longing, and that turned into a need for just some sort of acceptance. That led to me making the wrong kinds of friends. She closed her eyes and looked to the ground, hiding her now watering eyes. It was just the three of us. This girl named Rukia that treated me like a little sister, and my crush Yusuke. People always tried to pick on me, but those two always would protect me from the bullies. I thought that I meant something to them. They were just using me. Since I was a small kid, I could squeeze through the vents and move anywhere in the orphanage, getting everything from extra snacks to the keys for the ball closet. I hated the dark and compact spaces, but they would tease me then leave me alone until I went and did whatever they asked. One day I got stuck and cried out for someone to help me. The two of them didn't do anything and I was trapped in the vent for close to 2 hours until one of the orphanage workers heard me and got me out. I got into a lot of trouble for crawling in the vents and I was so scared that I just spilled everything I had done, getting the other two in trouble instead of me. The next time I tried to talk to them, they beat me for being useless and getting them in trouble. They finally spat on me and told me to never speak to them again. I never did. Naruto was stunned at the end of the story, unable to move as he wrestled with his anger for the two that hurt Tenten like that. Tenten looked up at Naruto, tears now falling down the sides of her face from the pain of remembering those events. Naruto's anger died, instantly replaced with a need to comfort her, so he smiled and lightly grabbed her arm. I'm an orphan too. I know how it feels. I never had a friend before I became a ninja, but I know how it feels to be thought of as useless. And to be scared of those bigger than you. I think you're great, and strong, and you care about others, Tenten, and not a lot of people do that. You're good people, Tenten, and I hope that we can be friends. Tenten blinked and wiped away her tears, smiling. She squeezed Naruto's hand in hers and he bit back a yelp of pain. Sure thing, Naruto. Thanks. I never told that story to anyone before. Thanks for listening. After the two of them smiled again to one another, Tenten helped Naruto back into his broken jacket, the bandages around his stomach and chest acting as a shirt. His pants, which had been cut down his legs into long strips so Tenten could heal his legs, waved a bit in the breeze, the bandages on his legs acting as underclothing. The two now ready, they began to make the painfully long trip over to the hospital. Halfway to the hospital, the two of them nearly reached the Hokage Tower where they ran into a woman with short black hair, a black kimono, and a pig in her arms. She took one look at Naruto before dropping the pig and rushing towards him. Hey! Hi Shizune Nichan, Naruto said nervously. The lady Naruto knew as Shizune ran straight for Naruto and began to worry over him, asking questions and smothering him with concern. Tenten was so caught off guard by the woman that she nearly dropped Naruto as she was trying to pull out a kunai to fend off the sudden intrusion of personal space. She didn't even reach halfway to her pouch before Shizune latched her hand around Tenten's wrist. So Naruto-kun, who is this? Shizune asked, not even bothering to face Tenten. Oh, that's my new friend Tenten. She's really great, she's the one who fixed me up. Shizune raised her eyebrows and looked Tenten over as if appraising her slightly. Then with a smile and a satisfied nod Shizune clasped both her hands to Tenten's. Thank you for taking care of Naruto-kun. Did you do all of the bandaging yourself? Why yeah, I put those on last. First I had to heal up his burns to a point where I could put a salve on them, then after applying it I was able to bandage him up. The burns were horrible all around, but the worst were centered on his face. I spent a good amount of chakra fixing it up to how it is now. Shizune looked shocked that such a thing had happened to Naruto before searching his face and really inspecting him. She noticed large discoloration around the back of his neck and some dark spots on the bandages, most likely from where extra salve had bled through. Still, if he was walking around then that must have meant that Tenten had done an excellent job on treating him with the limited chakra and resources that she had. Smiling lightly, she pinched Naruto's cheeks and pulled, giggling at how his face stretched much to his embarrassment. Well, his goofy face is all better now, so thank you for helping him. I'm sorry that you went through so much trouble though, if I had known about this I would have taken him straight to Tsunade-sama for treatment. Oh, I completely forgot about Bachan. Naruto exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Tenten perked up and turned to Naruto. Bachan, she thought and looked Naruto over, not seeing anything Naruto could have in common with Tsunade other than hair color. You know the legendary Tsunade personally, Naruto? She asked anxiously. Sure, I know Tsunade Bachan, I'm the one who brought her back to the village. He said nonchalantly. It's true, Tenten was it. Yes, it's actually true, if it wasn't for Naruto then I doubt Tsunade-sama would have returned to become Hokage. Shizune informed Tenten. Wow. Tenten's eyes sparkled and an idea formed. She turned to Naruto with an eager look and puppy dog eyes. Naruto, can you please introduce me to her? Shizune giggled slightly, shaking her head and patting Tenten's lightly. I'm sorry but Tsunade-sama is usually very busy and… Sure thing Tenten. Come on Nichan, let's go. Naruto shouted excitedly. Shizune bit her lip in slight nervousness. Really? Since she was going to take Naruto to Tsunade anyways, having Tenten tag along wasn't something bad. But she didn't know whether or not she would get in trouble with Tsunade for bringing an uninvited girl with her when she just wanted Naruto healed up. Sighing, she decided to give in to the children's request. Tsunade be damned, Shizune just couldn't say no to kids. It was her one true weakness. Alright then, just grab onto me tightly. We're close enough so I think we can shunshin in. Nodding, the two grabbed hold of Shizune tightly before they disappeared in a burst of speed only to reappear moments later in Tsunade's office, dizzy and struggling not to barf because of their inexperience with the technique. Shizune steadied them, giggling, before turning to Tsunade who was now coming out of the shock of seeing Naruto so hurt. Naruto. Tsunade shouted in worry, catching everyone's attention as she leapt over her desk and headed straight for Naruto. She checked him over with an experienced eye and seemed to catch everything that was wrong with him. What happened to you? How did you get burned so badly? Tsunade asked, her voice filled with worry over her pseudo-son. Naruto mumbled something about a training accident and Tenten shook her head. Why was he defending those two? Well, that's something she could fix at least. She was about to speak up when Tsunade turned to her and looked her over. You seem familiar. Have we met? Tsunade asked Tenten, making her feel down about not being remembered by her idol when they had just met that morning. Yes, Tsunade-sama, we met earlier this morning. In fact, I'm Tenten, a genin of Konoha, and we met while you were checking in on my teammate Rock Lee. Tsunade blinked as recognition set in. Ah, yes, now I remember. Well then, Tenten, what are you doing here? Not to be rude, but only a select few people are allowed to shunshin into my office. I, Tenten stammered, not quite capable of replying on the spot. Luckily, Naruto intervened for her. She wanted to meet you formally, Bachan. She's like your biggest fan. Naruto said, grinning at the way Tenten blushed and told him to be quiet in a hushed voice. Tsunade merely raised an eyebrow, though the hint of a smile was on her face. Really? Well, I'm flattered, Tenten, but as you can see, I'm rather busy right now. Tell you what though, after I fix up Naruto, we'll set a date to meet and talk. How's that? Tenten gaped before her face lit up like fireworks at a festival and nodded a yes. Tsunade smiled and turned to face Naruto again. She peeled back a bit of the bandages and stiffened slightly at the color and swelling. This is good first aid, Shizune, if a little under your usual standard. You just forgot to let the salve air out for a few minutes before applying to make it more potent, but it's still very effective. I should be able to heal this up no problem now, but why didn't you just heal him up fully with some medical jutsu? These are only second-degree burns, you can usually take care of them without too much trouble. Shizune blinked before turning sheepish and rubbing her arm awkwardly. Hey, actually Tsunade-sama, I didn't treat Naruto at all. From what I understand, the one who's helped Naruto-kun so far is Tenten here. That immediately caught Tsunade's attention. Spinning around, she stared at Tenten with a newfound intensity, her eyes going over Tenten completely as if trying to appraise her. Turning back to Shizune, the two women began to have a hurried conversation, all hushed tones and stares in Tenten's direction. After a few more moments, Tsunade bent down to Tenten's eye level. You used a medical jutsu to turn his third-degree burns to second-degree burns, correct? Tenten only nodded, astounded that Tsunade deduced such a thing, as she never told Shizune how severe the burns were. Do you mind showing me the jutsu you used? Hand signs only. Nodding, Tenten showed the signs, to which Tsunade grimaced a bit. That one works slow, so it causes enormous amounts of pain, but it is useful if you don't really know how to work a specific jutsu. After that, Tsunade began to quiz Tenten on other aspects of medical practice. After that, she had Tenten show her all her equipment and analyzed each piece individually. After all was said and done, she instructed Tenten to watch her closely as she approached Naruto and made several hand signs. Placing her hands on Naruto's chest, her hands glowed a bright green that enveloped Naruto's entire body for an instant before dying down and focusing on several different places, most notably the places he had been damaged the most. All Naruto felt was a slight discomfort and itchiness for half a minute before the jutsu ended and Tsunade peeled back some bandages to show smooth skin. Yipping in excitement, Naruto hugged Tsunade something fierce, the woman simply patting Naruto's head with a loving smile. Once they separated, however, Tsunade faced Tenten again, her eyes all business. Alright, I have a few questions for you. First of all, why do you know so much about medicine? Tenten breathed in and out slowly, dispelling her nerves. She had pictured a moment like this several hundred times before, and now all those long days of practicing this scene had paid off. You're my idol, and I want to be an even better kunoichi than you ever were. To surpass you is my greatest dream. So when I was younger I learned all I could about medicine. I don't use it much anymore but, well. Nodding, Tsunade merely continued on with her questions. Second, why did you help Naruto? Tenten blinked for a second in surprise before looking around. What is that, like a trick question or something? He was hurt and I could help him. I didn't need a reason other than that. It's not like I could just abandon him there like his teammates. Tenten's eyes then widened before she covered her mouth in her hands, acting as if she had said something she shouldn't have. She of course had meant to say it, but that was no reason to act like she did. What was that? Tsunade roared before turning to Naruto, who filled her in on the whole story. Grinding her teeth and swearing severe punishment for Naruto's teammates, Tsunade shook her head and returned to Tenten. Because of this revelation, I have some heavy thinking to do. So I want you to return tomorrow around noon so that we can finish our conversation. Oh, and bring your parents along, I'd like a word with them. At Tenten's crestfallen face, Tsunade's eyes widened. Oh, the poor thing. I don't have any parents, Tsunade-sama. I'm an orphan. Nodding sadly, Tsunade gripped Tenten's shoulder. I'm sorry. Well, you can bring Naruto instead if you'd like. Oh, and your Jonin-sensei guy, he should be there. Smiling sadly, Tenten bowed her head in thanks. Hi, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade went back behind her desk and dismissed the three of them. As they left, however, Tsunade called out to Naruto. Hey Gaki, walk Tenten home. It's getting late. Alright, see you tomorrow, Bachan. Naruto called back, waving as he ran out the door. Tenten turned around as Naruto called out her name. As he caught up and fell into step with her, he grinned brightly and put his hands to rest behind his head. Tenten raised an amused eyebrow and giggled a bit at Naruto. Bachan said that I should walk you home, you know, with how late it's getting. Is that okay? He asked sheepishly. He has never walked a girl home before. Tenten smiled at him, his nervousness was funny and, just a tiny bit cute. Of course, Naruto, I'd like that very much. Thank you. Naruto nodded happily and the two of them began wandering the streets of Konoha talking casually. The moon was shining brightly, and the village nightlife had just started to come out. Deciding to get something to eat before going to Tenten's home, the pair looked around for somewhere good to eat, or at least someplace that you didn't need ID to eat in. Man, Tenten sighed as she was told to go away from another more mature restaurant, not that they understood that, and met up again with Naruto, who was just as down on his luck, though for entirely different reasons. Where can we get something good to eat? It's almost 9, so most places that would let us in are closing now. Suddenly Naruto got a devious grin and grabbed Tenten's wrist. Come on, I know this great place that stay open real late. It's the best spot in the whole village. Naruto increased his speed, practically dragging Tenten through the air, who was outright laughing at the corny situation. She had never been dragged through the air, and although she didn't quite want to acknowledge it, it was very fun. As they were running and being pulled, two notable people saw the duo. One Neji Hyuga, who was on the streets having to escort his cousin, one Hinata Hyuga, who had needed to rush out and purchase more yarn to finish the Naruto plushie that she was making. Both Hyuga spun around as they went unnoticed by the passing duo, a single thought passing through both of their minds. Naruto and Tenten. The Hyugas froze for nearly a minute before wordlessly agreeing to follow. Naruto finally stopped pulling Tenten, letting her land back on ground. She was a bit out of breath from all of the laughing she did, but a large smile had seemed to attach permanently to her face. Naruto grinned and leaned in to whisper in her ear. Don't freak out and follow my lead. He whispered, leaving Tenten a bit confused. She finally took in her surroundings and realized they were right outside of a ramen bar. Tenten sniffed the air and was immediately comforted by the delicious aroma of cooking food. Smiling, Naruto wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Yeah, I remember my first time at Ichiraku's. Trust me, you will never find a better place to eat than right here. Come on. Naruto gently led Tenten inside and the two of them took a seat. As they waited for the chef, Naruto fidgeted around with his charred jacket. It was in pretty bad shape, with the zipper broken and the seams begging to unravel around the shoulders. He slowly and gently took it off and rummaged in the inner pockets until he found a slightly blackened frog wallet. He opened it and pulled out a piece of bright blue paper before stuffing it into his jacket pocket and returning the wallet back. Naruto. Tenten heard as Naruto put his jacket back on. How's our best customer? What can I get for you? A kind-looking old man in a chef's uniform came out from the back and stood in front of the two, smiling at Naruto. His name tag read Tucci. Hey old man Ichiraku, I came to cash in an old favor for something to eat. Oh, and I'd like you to meet Tenten. Tenten introduced herself just as two pairs of all-seeing eyes stopped on the dais of the ramen bar. They leaned in closely, listening to the situation intently. Anyways, like I said, I'm here to cash in a promise. Naruto said as he pretended to rummage through his clothes again. Chuckling a bit, Tucci crossed his arms. Oh, and what promise might that be? He asked amused. Remember when I was 10, you said that if I ever brought a date for dinner that you'd cop my meal. Well, this is my first date with Tenten, so bring on the free ramen. Tucci began to stutter, flabbergasted at the promise. Naruto ate enough for 10 people, a free meal would mean he'd lose way too much money. Neji was shocked and a little angry at Naruto, who he suspected was up to no good and trying to take advantage of Tenten. Which is technically correct, not that anyone would ever tell him that. Hinata was paralyzed in despair. Never before had she suspected that after Sakura there would be another girl that Naruto would try to pursue, let alone one that would actually date him. Tenten was surprised and about to protest when Naruto's words came back to her. Don't freak out and follow my lead. Now Tenten was grinning like mad. She liked pulling a prank just as much as the next person, and come on, free ramen. Yeah, Tucci-san, can you bring me and Naru-kun some ramen, pork preferably? Apparently this is the best place in the village to eat according to Naru-kun. Tucci could only stammer in response. Why you mean you two are really on a date? Of course we are, they said in unison, smiling mischievously at each other out of the corner of their eyes. Perfect, they thought, also coincidentally in unison. Tucci though still wasn't quite sure what to do. He knew he made a promise to Naruto, but the price of that ramen, listen Naruto, I'm sure you two will have a fine date here, but I just don't remember any. Immediately he was cut off as Naruto slammed the blue piece of paper from his wallet onto the counter. He leaned back on his stool in smug satisfaction at his victory as Tenten and Tucci inspected the paper. It had, date coupon, written on it and Tucci's signature at the bottom. What was that you were about to say, Tucci-san? Tenten asked mischievously, amused at the emotions Tucci was showing on his face. Well, what can I get for you two? An hour and a half later Naruto made it to Tenten's home. It was a small, one-bedroom apartment in one of the less than friendly parts of the village. It was much better than his own place, but Naruto couldn't help but feel a bit sad for Tenten having to live alone in such a place. Well, home sweet home, I guess. Thanks again for everything you did for me, Tenten. Naruto said happily as the two stood outside of Tenten's door. No, thank you, Naruto. This evening was really fun. You introduced me to Tsunade, talked to me like a normal girl, pulled me so I could fly through the whole village, and took me out to eat at a nice, homey place. I haven't enjoyed myself like this in a long time. It felt real good. Tenten leaned forward and gave Naruto a chaste kiss on the cheek, reddening a bit in embarrassment before giggling at Naruto's own crimson face. She opened her door and stepped inside before turning to him. Don't forget to pick me up early for our meeting with Tsunade. If you're early enough, maybe we could go out for breakfast. Good night, she said happily before closing the door. Naruto smiled softly and turned down the hallway so that he could make his way home, his heart and spirits lifted from how low they were earlier that day. Unknown to the two of them, however, across the street two Hyugas were seething in anger and jealousy. Naruto rose up from his bed groggy and hungry like he always did. Scratching his head, he made his way over to his kitchen and opened his fridge. After the milk fiasco, Naruto had always made sure to keep fresh groceries around and searched for something to munch on. A glass of milk and a banana along with a shower later had him searching his closet for anything to wear. With his jumpsuit pants shredded, he pulled out a pair of dark blue civilian slacks to wear along with a simple black t-shirt. He grabbed his charred and fraying orange jacket and tried to dust off the burnt look. It had to no avail. Sighing, he put it on and checked the time, a bit disappointed that it was barely 9. I shouldn't go to her house yet, but I'm so bored with nothing to do today. Maybe I can try to see if Ino's in a helping mood. And with that, Naruto ran out to meet the day. Ino Yamanaka casually leaned on the counter of her family's flower shop, reading an old magazine. She hated working the morning shift since practically no one came in until 10:30. Sighing, Ino turned another page when she heard the door chime. Welcome to the Yama, Naruto. Hey, come on in, Ino said happily to her fellow blonde, glad for the company. Naruto grinned at the greeting and joined Ino at the counter as she pushed the magazine away and smiled mischievously. All right, Whiskers, what's up? Did you finally take my advice to change your outfit, or is this a one-time thing? Naruto shook his head, frowning. No, actually all of my other clothes got destroyed, my jacket's all that's left and it doesn't even zip up anymore. It's still pretty comfy, but I don't know how much longer I can keep it since it's in such bad shape. Ino looked at nodded as she checked out the jacket's condition. Still, she approved of how Naruto was looking right now. His beat-up jacket left a feeling of toughness and mystery, his black shirt seemed to give good definition of his body, and those slacks of his were tight in all the right places. Oh yes, Ino was checking out Naruto, and soon found herself subconsciously licking her lips. Well then, if it's not the clothes, then it's gotta be the girl. How are you and Sakura doing? As Naruto's face darkened, Ino felt a bit unsettled. A month ago she had befriended the blonde with the intention of getting him and Sakura together, effectively leaving Sasuke all to herself where she could focus on chipping his defenses down instead of her rivalry. Since then, she's actually come to befriend the blonde doofus, and despite genuinely enjoying his friendship, she would still use him for her goals. Now, however, it seemed that Naruto didn't even want to think about Sakura. What's wrong, Naruto? Did something happen between you two? Ino asked, concerned. So Naruto told her the story of the previous day's fight, and though Ino felt like he exaggerated a few parts, like he could give Sasuke too much trouble, she still felt appalled when he told her about Sakura leaving him for Sasuke. That shallow bitch. I love Sasuke even more than she does, but I would never done something like that. How could she have just left you there? I would have said that he could walk me home after we got you to the hospital. Ooh, I'm going to kill her. Naruto was shocked, speechless, and very touched by Ino's response to all this. Nobody had ever stood up for him like that. It nearly brought a tear to his eyes, and it would have if he wasn't too manly for such emotional things despite the blurriness in his eyes that he was blaming on allergies. He quickly shook his head and caught Ino's attention. Ino, calm down, Ino, I can't tell you how much what you've just said meant to me, but that's not why I'm here. I need your help with 2 things. Breathing deeply so as to let go of her anger, Ino nodded, gesturing towards Naruto. Sure thing, Whiskers, what do you need? Naruto turned sheepish for a moment, his face turning red in embarrassment. Well, I kinda want to try and get over Sakura, so do you think you can help me with that? He muttered. Ino's eyes widened and her face heated up at what Naruto was implying. Was he trying to say that he wanted to pursue her now instead of Sakura? Did Naruto have feelings for her, or was he just trying to use her as a way to make him forget about Sakura? Before she could say anything, he continued. You know, like give me some help with how to act regularly around her, stop me from doing stupid stuff for her, coach me on stuff like that. Blinking and mentally sighing in both relief and slight disappointment at the misunderstanding, Ino simply nodded her head. Sure, Naruto. So, what's the second thing? Naruto scratched the back of his head and looked like he was reluctant to even ask. Can you help me go shopping? Naruto finally spit out. I'm all out of ninja clothes and you're really good with clothes and haggling, so I thought. Before Naruto could get another word out, Ino had already squealed in glee and clasped both of his hands in hers as stars twinkled in her eyes. Shopping was one of her many passions, and there was no way she would ever pass up the once-in-a-lifetime chance to give Naruto a makeover. Already she had several new outfit ideas for Naruto. Oh Naruto, of course I will. This is going to be great. Ino shouted excitedly in the other blonde's face, nearly popping an eardrum. She wiggled in even more delight as a particularly good outfit came to mind. Oh, and wouldn't highlights look good on that spiky blonde hair of his? And shoes. He would need a good pair of fashionable and function-able shoes to go with that. And Naruto's hand was waving in her face. Blinking, she moved her head back a little and refocused. Hey, are you alright? You've been holding my hand and staring off into space for like 3 minutes now. Naruto said with a light reddening in his cheeks. He'd never held a girl's hand before. Ino yelped and pulled her own hand back, her face redder than a tomato. I can help you shop once I'm out of work, okay? How's to sound for you? Getting back into his own groove, Naruto grinned and clapped his hands. Great. Thanks Ino, I owe you one, he said before bursting out of the shop with his look towards the clock. Ino stared out at the entrance of the shop for a while before she heard someone give a slight cough behind her. Spinning around, she saw her mom plop herself down on the counter right next to her, her amused smile telling Ino everything. Glad to see you're not entirely obsessed with the Uchiha boy. So when do you get the boyfriend, Ino? Ino's face flared and she tried to hide her face and respond at the same time. He isn't my boyfriend. Of course not, dear. Too bad. I was going to give you the rest of the day off to spend time with him, but I guess since he's not your boyfriend there's no need. So no slacking off and water those plants. Ino cried out indignantly and moved to get the watering pail. Out of the corner of her eye she saw her mother exiting into the back of the store, leaving her alone again. Slowly, she looked at her hand, the one that had held Naruto's, before turning away, her face heating up. Tenten was a woman of action. Or girl of action anyways. She was a girl of adventure, of pride. She was a girl that loved to prove that anything men did women could do better. Currently, however, she was a girl dripping wet in her bathrobe in her rundown apartment with the door broken down and a wide-eyed and blushing Hyuga male stuttering as he tried to comprehend what was going on. In one swift move, Tenten reacted on instinct and grabbed for the closest available weapon, a close-by frying pan, and threw it right at Neji, hitting him just above his forehead protector and knocking him unconscious on the floor. It was only then that she realized just what had happened, causing her to be properly embarrassed that Neji nearly saw her. Girls. Tenten hurried into her room and locked the door before shouting in frustration. Why did she have to be so afraid of spiders? To properly understand what just happened, we must travel back 1 minute to precisely 10 o'clock. Tenten was just walking out of her shower, refreshed and relaxed with her hair down. She was about to make her way to her room when she saw a rather large spider heading down from the ceiling towards her shoulder. Tenten screamed in terror and searched around for something to smash it with but found nothing. At the moment Tenten screamed, one Neji Hyuga was making his way to Tenten's apartment. He was going to see if he could stop her from dating Naruto anymore. It wasn't because he was jealous of the blonde-haired idiot who defeated him in battle, no, that would be a very un-Hyuga-like thing to feel, but because he cared about his teammates' well-being. There was no other reason for him to be heading to her house, nope, none at all. Suddenly he heard Tenten scream, and without thinking he quickly ran to her door and kicked it down, thinking that Tenten was in trouble. Instead he was met with quite a sight. Tenten, dripping wet and nearly with only her flimsy blue bathrobe covering her. No, don't use the Byakugan. Must not peep. The next thing he knew, a frying pan was soaring right at him and he was out like a light. 8 minutes after this little fiasco, Tenten came out of her room, fully dressed, and glared down at the unconscious boy. How could this happen? This isn't fair, she thought. Her crush had nearly seen her. She'd tried to get Neji to notice her as a woman for so long, and now this happens. Sure, he may finally take more notice in her, but now it would probably only be for her body. No, I can fix this. This is just another challenge that the universe is giving me to prove my love. First, Neji will come from my assets, but he'll fall for my personality and mind. Done with her inner monologue, Tenten sighed and lifted Neji, moving him to her couch. She leapt back and stretched as her clock struck 10:10 and Naruto appeared right outside her door. Hey Ten, what happened to the door? Tenten turned to Naruto and blinked. He looked completely different from yesterday. His new clothes put her into such a shock she nearly forgot to breathe. He looks really good, she thought. And Naruto, what are you doing here so early? Hey, I asked a question first, what happened? And is that Neji on your couch? Tenten blushed and stammered. Well, you see, I kinda knocked Neji out. What? Why? No, it's your turn now. What are you doing here so early? Tenten said, scowling. Naruto rolled his eyes. Fine, I came to pick you up. Why'd you knock out Neji? He broke down my door and nearly. Why are you coming to get me so early? Naruto shrugged and chuckled embarrassedly. You said we might be able to get breakfast before going to meet Bachan. I decided to come earlier since it's easier to eat without your crazy sensei. Is that all that Neji did? Tenten's face turned bright red and she shook her head. Nothing else happened. Okay. Anyways, yeah, let's go get something to eat. With that, Tenten searched around her apartment for a few things. She wrote a quick note sticking it to Neji's nose, grabbed her gear, and set a few traps around her door before forcing Naruto out the door and accidentally pushing him off of the guardrail. Tenten shouted in shock and looked over the rail to see Naruto sprawled on the ground, a large bump forming just on top of his head. That looks like it hurt. Tenten muttered to herself before she leapt down to help Naruto. Naruto and Tenten walked calmly down the street talking. Naruto began waving his arms frantically, a huge smile on his face, and Tenten's mouth hung slack before a fit of laughter overcame her. Hinata growled in anger at the older girl. This caused Hinata to pause. Older girl. Maybe Naruto likes older girls. That would explain why he liked Sakura since she was older than him. And Ino too, even though she's only about 2 weeks older than him. At the thought of the blonde hussy, Hinata got even more angry. How did that blonde banshee get into the mix? What was her business with Naruto? It didn't matter, just one more obstacle in her way to getting Naruto. Hinata blinked, having momentarily lost sight of them. She looked around and saw them heading into a new cafe. Hinata scowled and hid on the side of the building, activating her Byakugan. Naruto pulled out a seat for Tenten and she smiled at him as she sat. Chivalry was not sexist in her grateful opinion. He sat down in his own seat a bit hesitantly, his eyes shifting around a bit. Tenten raised her eyebrows and decided to say something. Naruto, are you okay? She asked, concerned about his behavior. Naruto straightened up and put on what he hoped was a disarming smile. It's just, are you sure you want to be seen with me somewhere like this? I mean, I don't have the greatest reputation. We could go some. Naruto, be quiet. You're my friend, I'm not going to be ashamed of you or something. Why don't you just relax, look over the menu, and enjoy your time? Everything will be just fine. Naruto let a small smile grace his lips before immediately being replaced with a look of worry as someone grabbed the back of his jacket and lifted him backwards off his chair. I thought I made it clear, brat, I don't want you coming anywhere near my restaurants. Tenten was shocked motionless as a middle-aged man hissed the words into Naruto's ear before dropping him on the floor and proceeding to literally kick him until Naruto ran out of the cafe, all to the cheers of the other customers. Naruto spared a quick look behind him and saw Tenten just sitting there at the table, doing nothing but staring at him. Suddenly her face became furious and Naruto turned away, running as fast as he could from the girl who seemed to be angry with him just to fit in with the crowd. From the girl he had thought was his friend. However, Tenten wasn't angry at Naruto. The whole time she was shocked motionless at the amount of prejudice directed at Naruto. It was only after he was kicked out and he turned to look at her did his hurt and dejected face cause something in her to snap. How dare they? Her face became a snarl as she rounded on the middle-aged man that was heading back to her table. What the is wrong with you? How could you do something like that to him? He's only 13 for Kami's sake. We may be ninja but we're still essentially kids. She shouted at the man whose face just became more and more sour. That monster is no child. He is a menace and should have been run out of this village years ago. The man said to the general approval of the rest of the cafe. Tenten couldn't stomach the reaction. She rose up with all her force, sending the chair flying behind her and slammed her hands on the table, snapping a large part of it off. She extended her finger and moved it about the room, making sure to point at everyone in it. You're all sick in the head. How can you stand, let alone cheer for such cruelty? Forget that he's a ninja that's sworn to protect you all with his life. Forget that he's someone who's done nothing but try his best to help people. Forget that he's someone who actually cares about other people. He is just a 13-year-old kid. And what you did to him, you all deserve to go to hell. Tenten sent one last hard look at each person in the cafe before giving 2 one-finger salutes and running out the cafe after her friend. Naruto was sitting against a wall in a murky alleyway. He still felt the pain every time. Not the physical pain, he could stand that, but the emotional pain. That was still something he had trouble handling. He had hoped that the difference in his usual wardrobe would hide him in plain sight, but it seemed that they still found him. Worse yet was that look of fury Naruto had seen on Tenten's face when they were looking at each other. He just couldn't handle her rejection too, so he ran. Like he always did. Naruto heard a pair of shuffling feet and quickly rose to run when he heard just who it was. NN Naruto. The small voice called. Naruto relaxed for a moment as he put the voice to a name. It was Hinata. Hinata. His eyes widened as a sudden chilling fear gripped him. Hinata had a huge crush on him and she could go crazy with jealousy. He remembered one time at Ichiraku's when Ayame had told him about how Hinata had threatened her not to try anything with him or else. Naruto had then started to pick up on what the girl would do around him and how she would obsessively follow him around, not to mention send death threats to nearly every girl that was friendly with him. Which wasn't many really, if you counted Ayame, the daughter of one of his neighbors that would sneak out and eat sweets and leftovers from her family with him, and an ex-stripper from the red light district that acted as an occasional older sister and was marked as his emergency contact. You would have 3 girls. 3 nice, attractive girls, but we'll get to them in a few chapters. Naruto wanted to bolt from his spot behind the trash can in the alley, but that could only make his situation worse. Hinata would surely give chase, and she'd ask why, and he'd have to tell her. Then she'd cry before killing him with those finger jab things she does. So he'd have to play it cool. Hinata. He stuttered out, hoping he kept the fear out of his voice. Didn't really work. What are you doing here? He asked, as if he didn't already know. It was a Thursday, and she always stalked him from dawn to dusk on Thursdays. She'd probably been following him since he left his house this morning. Sudden realization struck Naruto. If Hinata had followed him around all morning, that meant that she saw him with Ino and Tenten. Naruto knew Hinata wouldn't just dismiss something like having breakfast with Tenten or making plans with Ino, she'd downright plan for those girls to get lost. The girls were in serious danger. Naruto started to rise but froze. I can't tip her off that I know something. Think. How can I get away to check on the girls? Well, Naruto-kun, Hinata said, finally answering Naruto. I was out shopping and saw you running somewhere with this LL look on your face that had me worried. So I came to see if you were alright. Naruto rubbed his face in frustration and focused. He stood up and faced Hinata, who shied back a bit. He swallowed hard and created a cage bunshin before running away. Hinata was startled at first and moved to chase after Naruto, but the bunshin got in her way. Hinata, wait. Listen to me. Hinata paused and stared at the clone. Hinata, I just want to be alone right now, okay? Please don't follow me. Can you do that for me? Hinata bit her lip then hung her head. Yes, Naruto-kun. I just wanted to help. That's alright. I understand. Well, so long. The Naruto bunshin dispelled itself and Hinata was left alone in the alley, a few tears falling to the pavement. Naruto stopped his sudden retreat. As soon as his clone had dispelled itself, he had acquired knowledge of the short talk it had with Hinata. That had never happened before. Naruto pondered this even for a moment before making 4 more bunshin. Wordlessly, 2 went to the Yamanaka flower shop to protect Ino discreetly, while 2 more went in search of Tenten to make sure Hinata didn't try to pull anything with her. Naruto turned towards his right and looked at the clock in a shop window. It was only 10:40. How could such a nice day turn so badly so early? He sighed and made his way back home, intent on just staying inside for the rest of the day. However, the universe wasn't done with him yet. Naruto. Hey Dobi. Naruto stopped in his tracks, his anger swelling. It was Sasuke, damn it. Naruto turned around and blinked. Naruto was walking towards him with Sakura. But Sakura was ahead of the Uchiha and seemed to be ignoring him. What was up with that? A small twinge of hope seeped its way into Naruto's heart before he forcefully destroyed it. He had decided to stop chasing Sakura yesterday after she abandoned him. The last thing he wanted to do was to just forgive her as if nothing happened. And it seemed she was now uncomfortable around him too, what with how she kept avoiding looking at him. Sasuke though seemed to only look at him. Nice clothes, Dobi. What did you do? Rob a Goodwill store. Sasuke said, a smirk playing across his face. What do you want, Em? Naruto said, anger evident in his voice. I just wanted to tell you that I've got a meeting with the new Hokage this morning. Actually, Sakura does too. We're on our way there now. You didn't get a summon for a meeting, did you? Sasuke asked, knowing full well that Naruto didn't if he was going in the direction away from Hokage Tower. Naruto's face soured. Sasuke thought he was so superior. Well, he wasn't so special. Naruto was about to tell Sasuke about his own meeting with Bachin when he realized that it wasn't his meeting, it was Tenten's. That brought a defeated look to his face that Sasuke assumed was caused by Naruto's lack of special attention. The Dobi should have known that all that stuff would go away as quickly as it came. Training with a Sannin, a secret A-rank mission out of the village, the new Hokage's apparent favor. He's just a no-name orphan who should have realized all that stuff was temporary. And now it's left, like I knew it would. Come Sakura, let's go. Sasuke said, turning around to go back the way he came. Sakura turned towards Sasuke's figure with a scowl and sighed before turning and facing Naruto, a nervous look on her face. Quickly she wrapped her arms around him for less than a second before pulling away and turning. I'm really glad you're okay, Naruto. And I'm sorry I couldn't help you. I really am. I just wanted you to know that. And with that, Sakura walked off in the same direction as Sasuke, leaving a very shocked, very confused Naruto behind. Unknown to either of them, Sasuke had seen the whole thing and was brooding over it. I need to hurt you more now, Naruto. I need you to be stronger, and the only way you can do that is by suffering loss and gaining hatred, even if it is directed at me. So I'll take everything away from you for your benefit as much as mine. Tenten couldn't find the blonde anywhere. It didn't make sense. She had left maybe a minute after he ran away. There was no way he should have gotten so far ahead of her that she couldn't track him. It was almost as if someone had destroyed any trail that she could have used to find him. After an hour of futile searching, Tenten was starving and her meeting with Tsunade was too close to spend any more time on searching for the blonde. She would just have to go to the meeting with Guy-sensei only. But first, she had to get some food in her before she dropped. Looking around the marketplace, Tenten spied a cute little pancake stand. She sat at the counter and placed her order, enjoying the smell of fresh cooking when she was suddenly paralyzed by an overwhelming killer intent. Acting on instinct, Tenten shot out of her seat and drew a kunai looking for the source. Imagine her surprise when she found Hinata Hyuga walking towards her with the meanest look she had ever seen. Hinata? Tenten asked, confused but still wary. Hinata, are you okay? Hinata glared at her, a facial expression Tenten honestly thought the Hyuga girl was incapable of having. You know, Tenten, I thought you were nice. I thought you were a good friend. I thought that you would actually help me with my confidence problems and help me win the heart of my true love before any other girl could get him. You didn't help at all. Tenten blinked, then remembered a time when she had promised to help Hinata win the heart of some kid that always wore orange. Wait a minute, she couldn't mean. Wait, you meant Naruto. Well, what are you coming after me for? Just because I wasn't able to help doesn't mean you should blame me instead of the girl who took him. Oh, it suddenly made sense. Hinata must have seen them walking the streets, laughing and going into a restaurant together. She must have thought that she was dating Naruto. Why did you do it, Tenten? Why? Did you want to hurt me? Did you fall for him after simply hearing my stories about him? Or did you think that Ni-san would notice you more in Naruto's arms? Tenten blinked in confusion and shock. What was that? Tenten asked incredulously. Like she was that type of girl. What's Neji got to do with this? Hinata stopped moving. She had seen something on Tenten's face when she mentioned Neji. Then a snarl escaped her lips. That is why. You're just using Naruto-kun to get Ni-san's attention. You bitch. How dare you do? Hinata activated her Byakugan and charged at Tenten. Tenten began to move when a flash of burnt orange passed over her head and grabbed Hinata by the arms. Hinata started to struggle and shout before realizing who it was. Naruto. Both Tenten and Hinata asked in shock. Two Naruto clones held onto Hinata, restraining her and nearly causing the girl to faint before she realized that neither of the Narutos were real. Then Hinata had an epiphany. Doppelgangers. He put a tail on me. Me. Hinata began to cry in anger as she slapped the clone holding her right arm. It poofed out of existence. Then she focused on the other clone. Why? Why did he do it? Well, I know. He had to be concerned about me, that's all. Right. There's no other reason. He cares about me, so he wanted to make sure that I got home okay. Hinata spewed out any rationale she could think of, panicking and trying to stay away from the possible truth of the matter. He couldn't reject her love. He just couldn't. The Naruto clone began to panic and Tenten tried to edge forward, but Hinata turned to stare her down. Don't try anything. You'll still get yours, just you wait. I just want to know why Naruto-kun put a tail on me first. She turned back to the clone and grabbed it by the jacket, shaking it a bit. Okay. He was afraid you'd go after Tenten and made us follow you to stop you from hurting her. He didn't want to see her get hurt because you're too much of a possessive psycho. Hinata froze at those words. He knew. Naruto knew that she liked him. And he still refused to talk to her about it. Refused to be around her for too long. Continued to try and get dates from other girls. He rejected her completely. And he was more concerned about how she would react towards the other girls than he was about her feelings of rejection. Tears began to flow out of her eyes and as she dropped to the floor and wailed in sorrow. The crowd that had gathered all tried to get closer to her to comfort her but were halted by Tenten's raised hand. She walked over to Hinata and looked down at her, pity in her eyes. Why? I love him I am. Shouldn't that be enough? Hinata bawled out, her eyes screwed shut as she wailed again. Tenten kneeled down next to Hinata and tried to grab her friend's hand but Hinata slapped her hand away. She back up to her full height and kicked Tenten away with a chakra-enhanced foot. Tenten went soaring back past the crowd of lookers and towards a store window. She braced herself for impact with the glass when she found herself suddenly grabbed by something soft and warm. She slowed to a stop in the person's arms before looking up at the face of her savior, Naruto Uzumaki. Sorry I didn't get here sooner. I was halfway home when she dispelled the clone. You okay? Naruto asked, his hardened gaze never leaving Hinata's form. Tenten nodded and Naruto set her down. Good. Naruto. Hinata cried out in a panic. She hadn't expected the boy to show up. She turned to the clone next to her and saw it sigh in relief. Hinata turned back to Naruto, frantic. What are you doing here? Naruto looked around at the crowd. They stood stock still, frozen in fear of him as if he was suddenly going to attack. He sighed and rubbed his eyes before staring back at Hinata. What do you think you're doing, Hinata? You know this isn't right. You don't attack your friends, you protect them. What were you thinking? Hinata shook and tried to speak but couldn't find her voice. Hinata, I'm sorry. I should have just told you I didn't like you like that, but you have to understand, Hinata, that you cannot hurt those close to me. That's not fair to anybody. But, Hinata began to stutter out between gasps and tears. You're my Naru. No, Naruto said softly, cutting Hinata off. I'm not yours, Hinata. I never was. And I never will be. Hinata just couldn't take any more. She broke down, sobbing, calling Naruto's name, and all the said blonde could do was look at the ground in front of him. Tenten looked at Naruto with a mix of respect, confusion, and empathy. She touched his shoulder and Naruto reflexively moved away. Then he noticed it was Tenten and looked away from her. I'm sorry you got caught up in that, Tenten. I'll just go now. Before Tenten could say anything at all, Naruto turned and leapt towards the rooftops. Tenten looked between Hinata on the ground and the disappearing Naruto before leaping up to the rooftops and chasing after the boy. Hinata looked up towards the two running figures and curled into a ball, heartbroken. She wailed out and the crowd ran away from her in fear. Surprisingly, however, those that fled would go on to immediately tell everyone they could about what had just happened. And so it spread like wildfire, the tale of the evil princess, the noble warrior girl, and the kind-hearted demon boy. Shamed of yourselves. Tsunade finished ranting, breathing heavily due to all the yelling she ended up doing. She slammed her hands on the table in her office and leaned forward, an imposing figure to the two terrified, though the male would never admit it, genin. Do you have anything to say for yourselves? Tsunade asked as she sat back into her chair. There was nothing but silence for a long while as Sakura and Sasuke mainly looked at the floor. However, having had gone through more emotional roller coasters in the past 24 hours than she had in the last 13 years of her life, Sakura seemed to take it as just one more punch to the gut. So it was with great surprise that she found herself talking first. There is nothing I can do that will ever make what you think I did okay. But I know what I did and I have no shame in doing it. I know what it must have looked like to Naruto, but I only know that now. When Naruto took that fireball for me, there is no way that I would be ungrateful to him for it. I wanted to help him, I really did, but I had no idea what I could do. I was useless in such a situation. So I decided that if I couldn't help him, then I would find someone who could. So I ran off in the direction of the hospital, which coincidentally is where Sasuke was waiting for me. Tsunade scowled at the pink-haired girl's story. Did she really think she could get away with this pathetic excuse? Then would you please care to explain exactly why you never returned to the training ground? Tenten said that she must have been there healing Naruto for no less than 2 hours. The trek to the hospital would never take that long. At this, Sakura bowed her head in shame and stayed silent. Tsunade grunted in self-assurance. She knew that the girl was lying. I did go back. Tsunade blinked in surprise before setting a harsh glare at the girl who was still staring at the ground. What was that? You went back? Tsunade asked sternly, subtly telling the girl that she had better watch what she said next. Sakura looked up from the floor and stared fiercely at Tsunade, stunning her. Sakura's eyes had a strength she had seen in only one other girl, despite the tears that were threatening to fall from them. I said that I did go back. After I ran into Tenten to ask if they knew someone who could help, Tenten falsely assumed that I had left Naruto at the training grounds so I could spend time with Sasuke. She got so angry with me, I don't doubt that if I hadn't told her that Naruto was badly injured, she would have tried to hurt me physically instead of just verbally. After she ran off, part of me wanted to curl up and cry, but another part of me, the part that won out, wanted me to forget everything I was doing and chase after her to hurt her. So I ran towards the training grounds as well. Only, when I got there I froze. Sakura swallowed, trying to organize her now frantic memories and feelings of the previous night. I saw Tenten on the ground next to Naruto, struggling to heal his face. I saw how, as she finished, she smiled reassuringly at Naruto and run her thumb over his healed cheek. I heard Naruto croak out a thank you and Tenten telling him not to thank her yet, that the rest would be slower. Naruto simply said he was ready before they started, and I heard Naruto's cries of pain. I didn't stay longer than 5 minutes, I couldn't take hearing those screams and seeing the tears that were falling from his eyes. I couldn't get the scene out of my head though, and I just ran back home and hid in my room. I couldn't help Naruto at all. I did something worse than abandoning him. I left him in pain so that I could help myself. I'm so sorry. Sakura wiped away her tears and rapidly blinked her eyes. Ninja weren't supposed to cry and she had just done so in front of her Hokage. She really was useless. She wouldn't be surprised if she was taken out of the ninja ranks for her failures. Tsunade just looked at the pink-haired girl, a few thoughts going through her mind. This girl, she was an emotional wreck. At first she had started off as strong and confident, but throughout that whole explanation her confidence faded into nothing and she could see that she was physically exhausted from explaining everything. The bags around her eyes were probably from a lack of sleep from if what she said was true, picturing Naruto's burnt and crying body. And she could see that the girl was preparing herself for a rejection from the Hokage, probably thinking that she would be stripped of her rank or sent to jail or whatever sad idea of punishment that only fresh 13-year-old Genin could come up with. This girl was either the most talented actress in the entire world, or she was telling Tsunade the truth. Tsunade was inclined to believe the latter. With a sigh, she rubbed her forehead and took a look at Sakura's file again before setting it down and addressing the pinkett. Sakura, you said that you were useless in that situation. Well, you are right. You were useless, both in your personal inability to help Naruto as well as your inability to get a proper healer for him. Luckily you ran into Tenten, who has a very good grasp of medicine and was able to help him, but that is besides the point. Your file says that you have excellent chakra control and that you are both a fast learner as well as a very technical student. So I have a proposition for you. Do you want to stop being this useless girl, Sakura? Sakura shifted into her professional face, but Tsunade could see the yearning in her eyes as she nodded. Very much so, Hokage-sama. Nodding, Tsunade leaned forward on her desk. Then Sakura, you will have to do everything that will be expected of you without complaint, without delay, and without any form of defiance or attitude. You will follow all instructions to the letter, even if the reasons have not been explained to you, and you will have to go for days without rest sometimes. Do you think you can handle that, Sakura? Without any moment of hesitation, Sakura responded. If it's so that I will never be useless again, then I would gladly do triple of what is needed of me. Tsunade smiled challengingly at that. She had to be careful or else she would take a liking to this girl. All right then, Sakura Haruno, for your punishment to be carried out I first have to introduce you to someone. Turning to look at the woman behind her, Tsunade smiled. This would work as her final test. Come forward, Shizune, and meet your new apprentice. Shizune's eyes widened drastically as she tried to stutter out a response. Before that, however, Tsunade turned back to Sakura. Sakura, this woman behind me is my aide, friend, and apprentice. However, effective immediately, she is your new sensei. You will be her apprentice in all things medicine. Do you understand? Sakura nodded confidently as a bright smile overwhelmed her face and she turned to introduce herself to her new sensei. Or at least she tried to. Unfortunately, Shizune was too overwhelmed by the news and promptly fainted. Hey, well, you can start training once she wakes up. Tsunade shook her head in mirth before she refocused all her attention on the only male in the room. Now then, Uchiha, do you have anything to say? Sasuke just stared at the Hokage, clearly displeased about this whole meeting. He rolled his eyes and grunted that he had nothing to say and he would willingly take whatever punishment she gave him without trouble. Tsunade smiled conspiratorially. Really now? Well then, Uchiha, I have a special punishment for you. Naruto, wait. Tenten shouted at the blonde who was a few rooftops ahead of her. Naruto turned to see Tenten chasing him and landed on a random rooftop, stopping, all the while the look Tenten had on her face back at the cafe was going through his mind. Tenten landed just behind him and raised her hand to grab his shoulder and talk to him when he suddenly spun around and spoke, his voice harsh and his eyes pained. Fine. You know what? It's already been a shitty day, I don't care anymore, so go ahead. No really. Take your best shot, it's not like you'll get in trouble, hell everyone's doing it. It might as well be our damn national sport. Just leave me alone once you're done. Naruto finished by extending his arms and closing his eyes, body braced for impact. Tenten was taken back by Naruto's sudden shouting and stared at him, mouth open in a yet-to-be-spoken question. Naruto, what are you talking about? Did you think I wanted to hurt you? Naruto slowly opened his eyes and lowered his arms. He gazed at Tenten, searching her face, eyes, body for any type of deceit and found nothing. Chuckling sadly, he slumped against the rooftop's door and slid down to the floor. He cupped the back of his head in his hands as he stared at the ground in front of him. Great. Just great. The one time I decide to just deal with it, I was completely wrong. Tenten moved towards Naruto and stared down at his slumped form. He was shaking and Tenten could just barely make out a few water stains directly under where his face was. She lowered herself and sat on the floor next to Naruto, putting her hand softly on his back. He reflexively shied away from the touch, but Tenten forcefully pulled him close. Naruto, do people hurt you a lot? Like really often? Naruto did nothing but nod. And nobody cares. Nobody does anything to help you. Naruto shook his head and began to openly cry. Do they like to hurt you? She asked. Naruto nodded again. Tenten looked down Naruto, afraid of the answer to her final question. How long? Naruto, how long has this been going on? Naruto looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. He tried to speak but his mouth could only make sobbing sounds. Finally he was able to cry out one word before completely breaking down. Years. He cried out and sobbed into his hands. Tenten began to tear up and moved closer. She grabbed Naruto and pulled him into a hug where he broke down even more and ended up crying on Tenten's stomach. Tenten just continued to hold onto him tightly, tears freely falling from her face now. The two of them stayed that way for nearly an hour before both had had enough rest after crying their eyes out. Naruto lifted his head off of Tenten's damp stomach and sat back against the roof door. Tenten straightened up and did the same, the two of them turning their heads up to look at the sky. Are you going to be okay? Tenten asked hesitantly. She was concerned for Naruto, and was worried that even after all that crying and venting that there was still a lot of emotional pain hidden in him. Naruto slowly nodded, content for some reason, as if the tears had washed away a huge sadness in his heart he hadn't quite known was there. Yeah, I think I'm going to be okay. Tenten stared at Naruto out of the corner of her eye for a moment before a relieved smile made its way onto her face. She breathed easily and put her hand in his. Thanks for helping me with Hinata. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up. Naruto shook his head slowly and gripped her hand tighter. It was nothing, I'm just sorry I didn't tell you about her sooner. She's surprisingly possessive for such a shy girl. Tell me about it, Tenten said, a bit of amusement finding its way into her voice. Oh man, I just remembered. What? Your appointment with Bachan. We missed it because of me. Naruto said guiltily. Tenten shook her head and stood up, bringing Naruto up with her. It was not your fault we missed it. It's no one's fault. Stuff happens, okay. I can always reschedule with her. Naruto didn't seem at all convinced by her words. Plus this means we can have a nice lunch now. What do you think? She asked, glad that she finally got him to listen to her words. Naruto paused and stared at Tenten. But, what about what happened at the restaurant? Screw them. They're a bunch of assholes. How could they treat you like that? Naruto smiled and gripped Tenten's hand tighter. She pulled him towards the side of the rooftop and gave him a huge smile. I'm glad to see you can still smile. I'm sorry for taking so long to act back at the restaurant, Naruto. It's okay, Tenten. If it's all the same to you, I'd rather not talk about it. I understand, she said as she began to tow the side of the building in preparation, the boy at her side doing the same. Come on, I know this deli that makes the best sandwiches, and don't worry, they're the friendliest people I know. They even cop my meals sometimes. Naruto smiled and leaned forward. Sounds like my kind of place. With a nod to Tenten, the two reared up and leapt off the side of the building, their hearts so light they almost felt as if they were flying. Sasuke Uchiha grumpily walked down the streets of Konoha alone. After the meeting with that blasted Tsunade, he couldn't be around Sakura another instant. Just great. I try to help the Dobi get stronger and I get suspended from active duty for 3 months. For crying out loud, how could this happen? And Sakura of course gets off scot-free. Well, maybe not. From that description the hag gave, she's in for hell. Still, she gets to train under the Hokage's apprentice. The kiss up. Hey, did you hear about the demo? I mean Naruto and the Hyuga heiress. Sasuke heard some random civilian say to someone. He stopped and listened in for anything he could use on Naruto. You mean what happened an hour ago? Yeah, I still can't believe it. The second person said, her voice clearly telling how impressed he was with the situation. I know. The first woman continued. I would have never guessed that the heiress loved him, and to think she tried to get rid of her competition by fighting this real powerful kunoichi the boy had feelings for, only for Naruto to show up and save his girl from the heiress's underhanded attack. What was that girl's name again? Oh, I remember. The second woman said, Tenten. The girl's name was Tenten. Hidden around the corner, Sasuke Uchiha smiled cruelly. He had a new target. Naruto waved goodbye to Tenten as they went their separate ways after their lunch. The sandwiches at the deli Tenten took him to were the tastiest he had ever had. They ate and talked for more than an hour before Naruto had to go. Now heading down the street, Naruto noticed something odd. The villagers were staring at him differently. Where before he had been stared at with hate, and even ignored, almost everyone was staring at him with a mix of several different emotions. Confusion, consideration, hope, acceptance even. Naruto was utterly perplexed by these actions. Little did he know that ever since he helped Tenten with Hinata, a little over 3 hours ago now, the whole village had been scrambling around trying to spread the word, resulting in crazy rumors and renditions of the story to be born. Many villagers were confused as they couldn't understand how a demon like Naruto could possibly feel so human. Others thought that it wouldn't be so bad for Naruto to learn more about relationships, to understand how it feels to be a regular person in that way. Many females approved of Naruto's handling of the situation, especially the thought of how Naruto swooped down to save his one true love from the innocent-eyed deceiver. Most people, however, just hoped that Naruto would prove that he wasn't a monster and that he can be happy in love. The only reason for this though was because if they didn't hope that, then the only other possible outcome would be Naruto going on a rampage and killing the girl he saved if she happened to reject him. Not a nice thought for anyone. Naruto, however, took all these looks warily. He could feel the shift in opinions of him, but it had happened much too fast. Something must have happened that he didn't know about, and it put him a bit on edge. Naruto picked up his pace and began running, his open jacket flying behind him like a cape as he went straight up a building's side and made his way over the rooftops. After a short trip, He leapt off the side of a building with a shout of excitement and landed right next to Yamanaka Ino, waiting for him right outside of her shop. Ino jumped back and cried out in surprise at Naruto's entrance. The boy was just laughing at Ino's expression, and was trying hard not to fall on the floor and make Ino even madder. Naruto. Ino slowly growled out. Naruto immediately straightened out in fear. Ino walked over to him, hands on her hips, and leaned forward into his space to glare at him right in the eye. You baka. What the hell are you thinking scaring me like that? If you remember correctly, you asked me for my help, so you better not act like that while you're with me or you'll be on your own. Got it. Naruto raised his hands defensively and backed up from Ino, hoping to survive the verbal onslaught. Alright, I get it. Sorry, I just thought it would be funny to surprise you like that. Ino crossed her arms and pouted out, annoyed. She seemed to be thinking hard, then sighed in reluctance. She began walking forward and raised her hand. Naruto flinched but felt only a light pat on his head. He opened his eyes and saw Ino walking past him, a mischievous smile on her face. Come on, Whiskers, we've got some heavy-duty shopping to do. Ino announced excitedly before charging forward, Naruto trailing behind her as he tried to catch up. Tenten ascended the stairs to her apartment floor in low spirits. She had a great time with Naruto, but coming back home reminded her of Neji. She knew Neji must be furious with her for knocking him out and leaving that note on his head. She knew she was completely justified in her actions as she was protecting her womanly honor, but she didn't believe that Neji would see it that way. He may spurn Tenten away now, then she'd never have a chance to be with him. As Tenten came onto her floor, she saw that her door was fixed on its hinges again. Neji must have actually followed the directions on her note. That was surprising. She had expected him to just leave off in a huff. Tenten brought out her keys and unlocked the door when she suddenly heard Neji's shout of pain. She pushed the door open, kunai in hand and ready to fight, only to see Neji in her small kitchen wearing her frilly pink heart apron. She got it in a bargain sale for 80% off, and swearing at the stove as he held his hand. Tenten's eyes twitched and she had to force a hand over her mouth to stop herself from laughing. Neji turned around to her and gave her an annoyed expression. Go ahead and laugh, I was only trying to cook a quick lunch for you, no thanks necessary. Tenten couldn't hold in her mirth anymore and fell to the floor, clutching her sides as she laughed with all her might. After 2 full minutes of laughing, she picked herself up and giggled her way to the kitchen. What she saw were 3 different pots, each with something inedible burnt in them. One even looked like Neji had attempted to make cereal in the pot only for it to turn into a black mush. She laughed even harder at that. Well, ha, at least you tried to make lunch, she said in between fits of giggles. Neji grumbled and headed to the sink, putting his burnt hand under the soft stream of cold water while Tenten turned off the fire on her stove. Neji took off the apron and moved to sit down at the table while Tenten got to work scraping off the burnt food and cleaning her pots. When she finished, she went into her bathroom and grabbed her first aid kit and sat across from Neji, who was eyeing the box. Give me your hand, she told him, pulling out some minor burn ointment. No, it's not that bad. I'm fine. Tenten gave him a tired look and grabbed his hand before he could pull it away. He tried to fight Tenten for it, but one look from her made him stop cold. Good. Now we're getting somewhere. Tenten laid Neji's hand down and uncapped the ointment. Can you just get it over with? Neji asked, trying his best to sound impatient instead of nervous. Tenten grinned and gave Neji an amused grin. Why, is the whittle Hyuga afraid of some medicine? Neji blushed and glared at Tenten, who laughed it off. She scooped some ointment and lightly began to dab it on Neji's hand, working it until it was a clear gel. There. All done. Now isn't that better? Tenten asked after bandaging the hand. Neji grumbled a thanks and rubbed his hand. So why were you cooking for me anyways, Neji? Neji's face turned red and he looked away from Tenten. Just as an apology, no more. I acted in an inappropriate manner earlier and so wish to say I'm sorry. He droned out as if he had practiced what to say. Which he had. Tenten blushed and tried to change the subject. Well, thank you, but I wouldn't have eaten anyway. I had a meeting earlier that I missed and decided to grab lunch with a friend. A friend? Neji asked, not missing the hesitation in Tenten's answer. Who? I thought Lee was still in the hospital. Again, Tenten felt a sudden need to change topics. Ah, did you know that your cousin is crazy? Thankfully it worked. Hinata, why do you say that? Tenten sighed in relief and shrugged her shoulders. Well, as I was trying to go to my meeting, I was attacked by her out of the blue. It's her reason I was late to my meeting in the first place. But you are one of her only friends, why would she attack you? Tenten shook her heads as if lost for words. I don't know, she was just spouting off some nonsense that I couldn't even make out. Now that I think about it, she might have been drunk. Tenten added. Neji looked over at Tenten bewildered and thought over this new development. He could only think of one reason why Hinata would attack Tenten, and he knew that, if pushed to it, Hinata would act to ensure nothing was in her way. That must mean that Tenten was with Naruto again and Hinata saw it. Tenten, what is your relationship with Naruto Uzumaki? Neji suddenly asked, straight face and all. Tenten blinked in surprise before shouting. What? Alright Whiskers, you've been in there for 10 minutes, you must be done by now, so come out. Ino crossed her arms as Naruto whined from behind the curtain. No, it looks stupid, just hand me something new. Ino furrowed her eyebrows in frustration and growled. Naruto, come out now or so help me, I'll go in there and drag you out even if you're but. Remember, shame is good when shopping. Shame tells you that you need to try on something else. So come out and be ashamed like a man. Naruto glared at the curtain since he couldn't glare at Ino. Ino, let me tell you something. I feel no shame. It is impossible for me. In my body, where the shame gland should be, there's a second awesome gland. Ino stared at the curtain for a few seconds before she broke out into laughter at the stupid joke. Naruto, just get out here. She said through the laughs. Okay, I'm coming. Naruto grumbled some more before pulling back the curtain and stepping in front of Ino. He was dressed in a high-collared one-piece gray outfit with no sleeves and the pants portion of the outfit being cut off at the knee. I was visibly divided by an oversized weapons pouch that acted like a belt. Naruto also had a few accessories Ino helped him pick out for him. He wore a pair of forearm protectors and shin guards and his hitai was attached to his left bicep. You look great, Ino said at the scowling Naruto. What don't you like about it? Well, for one thing, it has absolutely no orange. I can't even, and besides not having orange, what's with the weapons pouch? You can keep a lot more weapons on you now. Ino said impassively. Ignoring the response, Naruto just went on. That's not even the biggest issue though. The worst thing about this damn thing is that it looks like something Sasuke would wear. It even has the abnormally high gravity defying collar. Ino huffed and glared at Naruto. Well, sorry, I'm not used to shopping for boys, you know. The least you could do is cut me some slack, I'm trying my best. Naruto sighed and palmed his face. She was right, of course he shouldn't be so harsh with her. I'm sorry Ino, I didn't mean to yell at you. This stuff just isn't what I'm used to, okay? Ino sighed and nodded her head. I get it. We'll just have to keep looking, I guess. Hey, at least this one was better than the last outfit you picked. It was basically civilian clothing. Well, that was just to get some laughs, Naruto. Go back in and undress while I get something new for you. Naruto nodded and pulled the curtain around again. He looked down at his current clothes and grabbed his orange jacket. He wished he could keep wearing it, but the more he moved around in it, the more the seam in the arms broke. He cursed Sasuke for destroying this jacket. His trademark look, the jacket old man Hokage had given him. Naruto's eyes saddened at the memory and he placed his hand on the center of the jacket. Just then he heard Ino calling his name. Naruto, here, I think you'll like this. Oh, and hand me your jacket. She said as she dropped the clothes onto the floor and extended her arm inside of the curtain. Naruto picked the clothes up and eyed her hand. Why do you want the jacket? He asked warily. Ino huffed, closing and opening her hand. Please just trust me, Naruto. I promise nothing bad will happen. Naruto stared at his jacket longingly, then handed it to Ino. Ino rushed away and Naruto just stared straight at the curtain for some time. Finally he broke out of his stupor and began to change out of his one piece and into the clothes Ino had given him. He stared at the pants then smiled, pulling them on. They were mostly a dark orange color with lots of red cargo pockets all along them, along with 2 red straps that hung at the sides. It widened out as it went down his leg, but once it hit mid-shin it began to close off, leaving only his ankles bare. It was lightweight and flexible enough for him to move however he wanted, and best of all, it was orange. These were definitely a keeper. Next, Naruto pulled on a long-sleeved sweatshirt. It was black and had a dark blue flame pattern going from the bottom, up his sides, and down the length of his sleeves. The material was very lightweight and breathable, which made Naruto wonder why it was long-sleeved until he saw the tag say that it was a chakra shirt. Grinning, Naruto channeled chakra into the shirt and it instantly became much harder. He raised his left arm and sliced it with a kunai grabbed from his pouch. However, when he investigated the cut he found that there was no tear in the material and his body didn't get a scratch. He had felt the pressure of the knife but no steel had touched his body. Wow. He moved his arms around a bit and checked his movements by doing a basic taijutsu stance. He waved his arms in circles, punched the air rapidly. He even tested it out without chakra flowing through it to ensure that even when the shirt was slack it wouldn't snag or tear. Content with the shirt, Naruto smiled brightly and decided to thank Ino profusely. Naruto, are you still in there? You didn't ditch me, did you? Naruto smiled and walked out of the changing booth. No, of course not, I was just getting used to this. When Naruto came out, Ino looked him over with an astonished gaze before whistling in appreciation. Damn, I am good, she announced, grinning. Naruto noticed that she was hiding something behind her back and tried to peer over her shoulder. Hey, what is that, Ino? Naruto asked. Ino backed away with a smile. Well, you were telling me how much you would miss your jacket the Hokage got you and that you wished there was some way you could still keep it around, so I kinda got an idea about that. Here. Ino then pulled something folded up and orange from behind her back and presented it to Naruto, blushing a little. Slowly, Naruto grabbed it and lifted it up. It unfolded and immediately Naruto was torn with how to feel. One part of Naruto felt incredible relief, another felt like crying out in joy to the heavens, and another still wanted to hug Ino for such an incredible gift. Naruto stared at what had been his jacket. It was now sleeveless, cutting off just past the shoulder and expertly sewn together. The left shoulder even had his swirl patch placed and secured on it. What had first been light blue stripes had been transformed into a dirty dark blue color by Sasuke's fireball, had now been retransformed into a nice solid deep blue color that looked amazing. The orange color, which had turned burnt orange due to aforementioned fireball, had also been fixed, making it seem a more natural jacket color as well as having no noticeable burn marks on the clothing. Naruto hesitantly put it on over his current clothes and turned to look at himself in the mirror. He had noticed that among other things, he had a new zipper, but the way it looked open had him astonished. He looked awesome. Ino came up behind him and put a hand on his shoulder. Well, what do you think, Naruto? She asked. Naruto smiled and before he could really think on it he hugged Ino. Ino stood stock still, shocked at Naruto's actions, then eased into the hug. Thank you, Ino. This is the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me. Naruto said, his voice cracking a bit, cluing Ino in on just how sincere he was being. Ino smiled to herself and eased out of the hug before gathering 3 extra sets of Naruto's outfit while he folded up the clothes he had worn into the store. As they started to make their way to the counter, Naruto paused and turned to Ino. Ino, how'd you turn my jacket into this vest? Well, I know this store really well cause one of my mom's friends is a seamstress here. This place rarely orders clothes, they prefer to make them here. So I just took the jacket to her and she was more than happy to help. Nodding at having his question answered, Naruto thought for a moment before speaking again. Hey, this vest, it's really great and stuff, so I wanna pay you back a bit. Do you want something from here? I'll pay. Ino stopped and a grin spread over her face. Wait here, I found the cutest outfit while looking for yours. She handed Naruto his clothes before dashing off around then store as a purple blur. 20 seconds later Ino was standing in front of Naruto again in a new outfit. She was wearing long black spandex pants not unlike Sakura's that stopped just below the middle of her shin. Over that she wore a new purple skirt, the front of which reaching her knees, the back extending down her whole leg to her ankles, and the sides split open from just below the waist. She had what appeared to be a long-sleeved version of her purple tank top over which she had a slightly darker purple vest with a hood that seemed to be made of the same material as Naruto's chakra shirt. To finish off the new look she had on a pair of black fingerless gloves. Naruto whistled in awe. That was fast. How'd you do that? Practice, she said with a smile. Cool, huh? I've been hearing about a few of the others in our year starting to take being a ninja more seriously, so I need to start working too, and these new clothes should help emphasize that. Naruto rolled his eyes with a chuckle. Right, you just wanted some new clothes, he said, not really buying what he was hearing. Ino only stuck out her tongue before grabbing 3 more pairs of her outfit before looking at the whole pile of clothes uncertainly. Hey, are you sure you can afford all of this? I guess I could buy my stuff later if not. Naruto shook his head and reached into his new vest for Gama-chan. I'm completely sure. Ero-sennin made sure to pay me back all my money after finding Ba-chan, and besides I've got more than enough money with the shinobi discount. When the two reached the register the cashier looked at them with a harsh glare. He rung them up and gave them their total. 571 ryo is your total. How will you be paying, cash or check? What? There's no way that it can be that much. Naruto shouted. What about our shinobi 30% discount? It's there for her clothes, but as for you, I would sooner commit suicide than acknowledge you as a shinobi. The man then spat on Naruto's face only for Ino to slap in disgust. How dare you? He's a shinobi who deserves your respect like any other. You can't treat him like this. I can and I will, girly. I don't see anyone here telling me otherwise. The man said smugly. But still, even without the discount you more than doubled the price of his stuff. It should be more like 240 ryo. Ino tried to reason. Listen here, it's my shop, I make the rules, and if I want to charge him so much then it's my business, got it? The man shouted. Naruto growled and stepped in front of Ino. Hey, don't yell at her like that. If you're going to yell at someone, yell at me. Leave her out of this. The man was quick to comply with Naruto's demands and soon the two were arguing, calling each other names, and starting to get ready.